Hello everyone, it's Jake from Fife Paranormal, and I'm here at the Strasburg Paravation, where I'll be speaking a little later today. Now this is on a battlefield, which is always really cool. This is actually the first event I've done in a little while, so it's good to be back out in the field, you know, go on a bit of a road trip. I've actually never been up here before, even though I only live, you know, not terribly far away. So we're gonna explore just a little bit. I'm gonna do my guest speaking, and we'll try not to get into trouble. I'm like 5 minutes, you know, till I'm ending my lecture. Yeah. So it'd be like 12:25.
Yeah, it's going. It was already going.
Great cameraman.
You're supposed to go.
I was gonna say, where's the action? But yeah, I'm Jake Fife. I'm the co-founder of Fife Paranormal, based out of Stanton, Virginia. I actually love speaking at Civil War battlefields. I just, you know, love speaking, wandering the battlefields. I'm one of the people that will just wander and just like get lost, have to find my way back. But Daniel, what are you doing?
I'm fixing it. I didn't know you'd be standing that far over there. You said you're standing there.
Anyway, I've been a paranormal investigator for about 12 years now. I was taught mostly by my father, who's been an investigator since the early 80s, so not terribly long ago. But my lecture today is to be on the process of a paranormal investigation. And when I first started, I had only seen stuff on TV. You know, my favorite show was Ghost Hunters, Destination Truth, which I think is still the best paranormal cryptid show of all time. Nothing comes close to it. But, you know, so I knew, get a voice recorder, get a flashlight, and just kind of wander around. But my dad, when he saw me doing this, he's like, you know, that's fine for starting out. But he wanted to show me the right way to do it if I wanted to do more formal investigations. So he took me to a local cemetery, which I guess happens at every kid around 10 years old. And, you know, he gave me a notepad, a flashlight, and not a digital recorder. He didn't let me use that. We got an old cassette recorder that he had been using since the 80s. We had about 3 things of blank tape.
Yeah.
And he wanted to teach me the same way that he was taught, which was weird because, you know, here he is with a flashlight taking pictures my very first time, and I've got this huge cassette recorder that's, you know, spinning around. I've got the microphone. And it just felt, I don't know, felt archaic, but there's something really, really cool about it. And, you know, the lesson he was trying to teach me with that was less is more. If you have less equipment with you, you can pay more attention to your surroundings, your body, and what the spirits are telling you. So whenever I plan an investigation, I usually try to pack the least amount of equipment, simply because I do like to pay attention to my surroundings. So he taught me the first thing you do, pick out a location. Now, you can't just really pick out a place like, I want to go there, I'll investigate. He told me the way it works is you decide what kind of investigation do you want to do. Are you trying to solve a mystery? Are you doing like a historical analysis like a battlefield? I had a question like what regiment, what exactly they did. I want to do research on the captains, the people that died there, so that I can go to those spots and ask them those questions. And that's my favorite, honestly, to do. Or do you just want to, you know, have fun? Just go out the voice recorder and see what you get. And early on, that's what I did, but he told me there was a whole lot more to it, because sometimes you're going to find something that can change the course of a location's history. And for me, I love history, I love mysteries, which rhymes, it's kind of fun. So that appealed to me. So the first process I like to use during an investigation, pick the location. I like to do historical places, mainly battlefields. I just feel a bit more connected to it because I do have that strong history background. Also reading, you know, like troop lists, you know, casualty figures, it comes naturally to me. Like I can look at a huge list of casualties and just remember every single one just like that. I've also given many Civil War lectures, St. Albans, Fleetwood, not at Appomattox, but not Fleetwood, Gordonsville. That was one of my favorites. But I love doing that simply because you do feel more connected, and I think if you're able to connect with a location better, the spirits will be more apt to talk to you. Because if you go to a place, hey, I'm Jake, talk to me, and just stick your voice recorder out, I don't think, you know, they're really going to want to come up to you. So when I plan for that kind of investigation, first I do my research. Some people, they like to do a lot of historical research, come up with like a huge list of questions. Other people like to go in blind. Now, there are 2 pros and cons really for each one. If you do all of your research, you can have location-specific questions. Like if you investigate the house of, you know, Colonel Smith, who died in the front parlor after receiving a bullet wound, you can come up with a line of questioning for Mr. Smith. That way, if when you're doing your evidence review, you get something, you know, from Mr. Smith, or something that, you know, pertains to his life, then, you know, I think that's a better piece of evidence than if you were to kind of go in blind because you had that research beforehand, you had specific sets of questions, and you were able to verify a historical event that can be proven. Now, on the other hand, if you don't do that, you go in blind, just ask a bunch of questions, it could be cool if you get, you know, Mr. Smith, but say you do that. You get, you know, what's your name? Colonel Smith. Oh, cool, you know, who's Colonel Smith? I don't know the history of the place, you know, I don't know what questions asked, like what battle you were injured at, who brought you here, and I think the more, I guess, historical facts that you can verify from a spirit, I think that establishes more intelligent spirit communication, and I think if you present it to a skeptic, it provides better evidence. So what I like to do is I like to have a huge list of the main areas of a building I'm going to investigate, like a battlefield, you know, where did they form up, where did they encamp, where did the heaviest fighting take place, and then after the battle, what they don't understand, what a lot of people don't understand, is there's a lot of chaos in battle, whether it be Revolutionary War, Civil War, World War II. You know, most times they didn't have like an orderly retreat. There was usually a lot of confusion going on, a lot of heightened emotions. And sometimes these emotions can leave a stain, an imprint on the ground, on a tree, in a building, or something like that. And so I think knowing these spots, you can ask questions specific to those events in the battle and have a better chance of making contact. So I'll usually make my list, go over it, verify, you know, Wikipedia, local historians. I love working with historical societies. They always have the best information. I actually volunteered at one for a short time. It was all sorts of fun. But, you know, verifying with all different sorts of people so that when you get there, you know, this is accurate information, this is exactly what happened. And then I like to kind of plan mine in a circle. You know, sometimes teams will go in and they'll just investigate and then kind of spread out, or they'll go where you feel led. I usually like to do my first initial run in a circle. And in my mind, the way it works is, one, you're establishing a pattern. And also psychologically, you're setting up a well-rounded investigation. What sounds cheesy, but if you can create, you know, those little patterns in your head, it can keep you sort of on track. You know, if you're in this area for the first, you know, you can just follow this circle. So when you do your second run, you can know, hey, this is where I've been, this is where I felt this was the most information, and then you can go from there. So after you have your checklist, history, and all that stuff, I like to go on Google or I'll go on Facebook, and I'll just look for keywords like, you know, such location, ghost stories, or haunted, and I like to compile a list of, you know, what people experience. It doesn't matter if it's like, you know, just like a one-off, oh, you know, I saw this, that's it, or if it's like a huge thing like some of these places have. And what I like to do is look for patterns, because if something is happening, you know, on a repeated time, you know, people go in here, they see a shadow figure, 3 months later someone else says they see a shadow figure, more than likely that's a residual entity. A residual entity is basically a repeat of events from the past that have kind of soaked themselves into the location, either because of great trauma, environmental conditions, there are sorts of different things that could be, you know, for a residual. And so I like to compile a list of intelligent, residual, and then kind of like in the middle stuff. And it's a lot of stuff. So I like to try and recreate these events. Which, you know, if you can recreate, you can kind of knock off, you know, if it's residual, most of the time you can't communicate with it. You can, in a sense, summon it, as in you can try and recreate that environment. That's a bit more scientific. But there's some of my favorite ones to do. I was investigating the Fleetwood Church last fall, and we were there late at night, and we were in this place, I forget the name of the field, but there had been a huge charge that had come across, and I had found a bunch of Facebook reports of people saying, oh, you know, you can hear cavalrymen coming through, and so, you know, I came up with that list, and it was a public event, so it was kind of tough to steer people to this random field, but we actually got there, it was around 1 a.m. in the morning, and we're sitting there, and they were saying, you know, smaller groups tend to experience this, that kind of stuff, so I had about 5 or 6 people with me, no spirit box. We were just sitting there listening, and I actually had pre-recorded sounds of a Civil War battle on my phone, and I had actually taken 2 voice recorders, and I had one for sound effects, for, you know, trying to get the entities to stir, the other was actual recording. So what I did was I was able to mark the exact spot where the charge occurred, where the 2 armies clashed. And I set that recorder in the field, probably 30 yards ahead of us. Had my voice recorder in the back. I made a note, hey, if you hear this sound, this many seconds, that's what this is. So set it up, told everyone was coming. Sure enough, 10 minutes later, I didn't hear it, but other people reported the sound of horses neighing. which was really cool because there's no horses, no farms nearby. Some people thought they said tall figures looked like they were floating, which if you think it's a cavalry battle, they're probably on horseback. We ended up seeing other stuff. I did hear what sounded like gunfire later in the night, which was really cool. But if I didn't have that information, then I would have known to set up that test. Another place, St. Albans Sanatorium, I did something very similar. I had something at the very end of a hallway, which was actually the sound of an old bell. My grandfather, he has an old church, and in it he has just, like some old bells that they used to use. So I had the sound of it recorded. And what I did was I studied the patterns of an old mental hospital. There was nothing about St. Albans, which is kind of typical for the time. But I knew in the children's ward, at a certain point in time, every single night, they would ring a good night bell. And it sounded different from the others, and they said it was very similar to a church bell. So what I did was I went to the middle of the children's ward. I think they said it was around 8 o'clock, 9 o'clock at night. So around that same time, set stuff up, had it go off at a certain moment. Turned the spirit box on. We had so many kid responses, it wasn't even funny. Like, I think within 20 minutes we had about 31, A, B, and C class. Most of them were B and C, but, we had some really good A ones. We had one actually tell us, my dad asked, he said, "So what are you all doing?" And the boy said, "Sleep now." And we were like, that's pretty cool because it would have been their bedtime. So what we did was we actually told them good night, all that stuff. We actually did not go back to that area the rest of the night. So, I'm very thankful my dad taught me that. It's also good for evidence review, too. I like to mark down on a voice recording, on such place, such time, this is the reports, this is what I found. Because there's a place I investigated, Nickerson Sneed House, Glade Springs, Virginia. It's an amazing location.
What's it called?
Nickerson Sneed House. It's beautiful.
And where is it again?
Glade Springs. It's about 3.5 hours south, near the Tennessee border. It's beautiful, but it's weird the way they set it up. It was a log cabin. It was actually an old fort built by Francis Keane in 1745. He used to ride with George Washington surveying. But they just literally built a house completely around it. And the owners of the house, they've done an amazing job looking up the history of it. But there were some, there were some holes in the history, like they had, 1824, this happened, 1827, this happened, 1840, and then there'd be a gap of like 10, 15 years. Of course, Civil War is very well documented past that. But I asked them, I said, pre-1820, I was like, what happened? They're like, well, he built the fort. I was like, okay. They're like, well, it might have been attacked. I was like, well, if it might have been attacked, people died. And they're like, oh yeah, probably. So I was like, all right. So I went through so many different survey maps. What I actually ended up doing, there was a guy in 1758, before he was actually sent north to do some more surveys with George Washington and a few others. He did a survey map of all the region of Glade Springs, everywhere else around, and he actually had it marked as old forts. And he actually had a map of the old cabin, what it looked like, because he was very detailed. So it wasn't just like a box. It was, cabin. He had the roof drawn. He had a little farm area. What was it? He had the wood line. He described it as, the Indian line, because apparently that's where they would come from. So I knew when I investigated this location, the Indian line more than likely, any attacks would have come from that direction. So I could look at the point of the cabin of where, if someone died, settler or not, where they would have fallen. So when I got there, I was able to get an idea of where the cabin was, just kind of where I could dictate that part of the investigation. Also did some more research on the guy who built it, Francis King Cannon. He had a very sketchy past. There's not a lot known about him. His son actually fought with one of my ancestors at the Battle of Kings Mountain in 1780, but was discharged for mysterious circumstances, and it was a little strange. So what we were able to do in that investigation was we were actually able, the very first time, to make contact with a spirit who referred to themselves as Francis. And we presented the evidence. They're like, no one's ever done this before, no one's ever contacted them before, and it was one of the coolest things in the world. But we actually found out that someone had been wounded in the house during one of the attacks. And so, we're thinking, the history of the ghosts in the area probably predates 1750. Nothing that was cool, they have it written on the site that it was built around 1746, 1747. I found a mentioning in a diary stopped at King Cannon's fort, it was like 44. 2 years before they actually had it listed as being built, which was really freaking cool. But having that historical knowledge, I like to be armed with that. Now, going to the location, I typically have my dad drive, even if it's my car, simply because I have, like a whole wall in my room of like sticky notes, historical stuff, try this, they claim this. And, we try to debunk everything. That's just how I am. That's how my dad taught me to be. If someone claims something, I want to try to debunk it. If I can't debunk it, I want to try to experience it. So while he was driving, the important stuff, I'm sitting here with my laptop, I've got notes all over the car, it looks horrible. And I'm like, we remember this, when you go in this room, you need to do this, we need to act a certain way, that kind of stuff. But getting to location, this is one of the most underrated aspects of a paranormal investigation. When I first started, we would just go to a location, do a historical tour. They'd be like, all right, you're on your own. We'd be like, cool, thanks. We'd set up our stuff and investigate. But as I got older, I started, realizing that it really benefited the investigation if you just took the time, usually it's after the history tour, and just walk around. You familiarize yourself with a location, the spirits get used to seeing you there, but what's also extremely important, I learned this when I investigated St. Albans for the 3rd time. I did learn my lesson the previous 2 times, but you can get a baseline reading of the energy of a location. Because I'm not psychic, I don't have abilities, I've been told I do, I've been tested for clairvoyancy, I don't think I do, I just don't believe I do. But you can tell an energy shift in a location. Sometimes it's in the form of like, wind coming over when there's no drafts. I think that can almost be, like in movies they have sound cues or stuff like that. I think that can be like a spiritual cue that something has changed. So I just like to walk around. I'm a photographer, videographer, so I'm always doing this, taking photos, stuff like that. And what I do is I go back to base camp and I'll pull out my little book. And I'll just write, notice this, felt this area felt this way, other areas felt this. And so that when I'm doing my circle, first rotation, I can make notes to watch out for certain areas and see if I can notice a change. Because the paranormal it's very energy driven, but it's also very human driven. The way you approach the investigation, your mindset, your intentions, and everything that's going on in your life does carry over into an investigation. So if you go in and you've had a bad week, lost your job, and terrible things have happened, even if you're positive, you're still going to have a little bit of negativity to you, even if it's, even if you're not aware of it. So it's very good to calm yourself, clear the air. So what I usually do is I'll take a few deep breaths, walk around, and say, I'm clear, I'm only focused on this, nothing else matters. And that's when I first walk into a location. So, I have my huge list of what I noticed, have my intentions, perfectly set, because something I noticed, if you go in and you're excited to be there, your energy is up, the spirits are a bit more likely to communicate with you. And I used to wonder, why is that exactly? That seems, not really, seems like a bit of a coincidence, seems strange, but the way it works in my mind is you're artificially feeding energy into a location. As some people, they think the paranormal is more of just, us projecting stuff. Oh, cute dog. But yeah, knowing your intentions for not just, why you're there, but also why your team is there, make sure everyone is on the same page. That's extremely crucial. Keep you safe, help you have the best investigation possible, and will keep the location pretty calm. So once you've done all of that stuff, you actually get to the investigation. It's tough for me to describe because I don't have a big group, and it's just my dad and I typically. But what we usually like to do, we have a game plan. We're going to first do our circle. For bigger locations, if it's got like levels, underground, we usually carve out about an hour and a half for this rotation. If it's a smaller location, like if we were investigating this museum, it would probably be maybe 30 minutes, 30, 40. So what we'll do is we'll do our quick readings, do like quick little sessions, burst sessions, I guess is what they would call it. And then we come back to base camp. What we'll do is, we'll talk, what did you feel? What did you think when you were here? What did you experience? And so I'll go back and look at, my sticky notes, my 10 million sticky notes, and I'll be like, we noticed this in, such and such room. Does this correlate with what people are, experiencing there? If it does, cool. We know, we can verify evidence here. If not, then I'll look at the history. Okay, I felt such and such here, like, I'm in the boiler room, I feel dread, I feel, sorrow. Why? Look at the history. Oh, someone was murdered there brutally 30 years ago. It's like, that might make sense. So once you're in the investigation, things can change just like that. I've been in locations or cemeteries, cemeteries very peaceful, broad daylight, very quiet, and all of a sudden it's like it gets dark. And you can almost see the way I see it is like a dark mist just like comes down. It's like everything changes. You feel a bit more paranoid. I get a tinnitus in my ear, even though I don't suffer from tinnitus. I just start hearing ringing, my hairs will stand up. And that's usually, when I put my guard, I'm like, something's seriously wrong here. Think back to the history, could there be dark energy it's pulling from? Because dark entities, if there's a location that has dark history, murders, death, any sadness, they will pull from that energy. Because if a negative entity is able to pull energy from a negative event, it will actually have more energy to do stuff and manifest than if it was a pull from positive energy. Because positive energy and a negative spirit, they don't go together. It can pull energy from that, but by pulling from that, I believe that it severely limits what it can do. So if I know I'm going to a location that has a dark history and there's that potential, what I'll do is I'll do an extra, you always have to protect yourself. Some people do the white light exercise, some people say a long prayer. I usually do the white light, a prayer, and I like to kind of ground myself, which is, go back to my military school, stand at about 45, imagine yourself going way up, way down, but not just the energy, but yourself. I am well rooted in my spot. Nothing will uproot me regardless of what happens. And then what I'll do is I'll open my eyes, breathe out, and then I'll just carry on. So when a location changes the energy, if you're in a bigger group, I have seen it happen where some people will freak out. And they'll just go, oh my God, it's a demon, we're freaking, we're all gonna die. And I've seen it go horribly wrong. I was in an event at St. Alban Sanatorium 2 years ago where we started the group with 15 people. We ended the night with 3 people, including our guides, telling me, Jake, you know where to go, you've got this. We can't do it. Simply because people were getting physically affected, people were breaking down crying. It was horrible, and thankfully I had most of it recorded. I was so happy I did. But that was an instance of, we were there because it's like a 4.5 hour, 5 hour thing. Nothing had happened for the first 2.5 hours. We were kind of bored. I felt let down, honestly. But all of a sudden we went to this certain area, and I noticed our questions changed. We went from, hey, is anyone here? Oh, cool, we want to talk with cool, happy spirits, to, hey, we've been here a while, nothing's happening, where are you? It might not seem negative, you might seem almost joking, like, hey, where are you? But it has a negative connotation to it, even if you don't intend it to be. And that goes for humans and spirits, now that I'm thinking about it. But, our questions became a bit more darker, even if we didn't notice. And going back, I always wondered if we had wandered into an area where a darker entity was kind of hiding, if it was maybe manipulating, our enunciation, our intentions. And that was a failure on my part to, kind of read the area. Because honestly, I guess I had fallen prey to it, I was a little upset, I paid $75, drove 3 hours down, nothing's happening, I'm freezing to death. I was waiting for something to happen. So, the paranormal you always learn. I can talk for hours, this is what you do, this is what you don't do. And you'll still run into a situation that you don't know what to do. That happens to me all the time. So when an energy changes, if you're in a big group, get everyone together as close as possible. There's safety in numbers. Just like you see elephants, if they're by water, lion or alligator attacks them, they'll huddle together. There's strength in numbers. You create that defensive barrier. Get everyone grounded, say a prayer, do whatever you all do to stay safe, and then you proceed. So during the investigation, it's very important to read the energy, not just for negative shift changes, but also changes in normal spirits. There are some locations where it seems like the energy just dies after, a few hours, or maybe after a few hours it picks up. As for why this is, I've never understood. I don't know. 12 years of doing this, I would love to know that answer. But we've investigated locations. It'll be really active for 6 or 7 hours, and then for the last 3 hours, there's absolutely nothing will happen. Or we investigated a place in Williamsburg. It was active. It was insanely active for an hour. And for the other 7.5 hours we were there, we didn't get one single voice, didn't get a single spirit box response, nothing. No one saw anything. So by reading the cues of a location, you can tailor your investigation, for the maximum amount of evidence. If, this side of the house is a bit more active, focus your investigation there. If you have a certain goal, like, there's a historical mystery, no one's been able to solve it, tailor your investigation around that. And if you experience that energy shift from, really active to really quiet, leave that area for just a little bit. You can go back to the safety area, chill out for a little bit, go to another area, and then you can come back later. That's how I approach those kind of investigations. But if I'm just doing a general investigation where I'm filming for like our travel series, the Fife Files, if there's an area I really want something to happen because, people see a headless person walk in with, glowing red eyes show up from his chest like Mothman. I was like, I kind of want to experience that. So, I'll give, Proto Mothman time to do stuff. If he doesn't do stuff, I'll leave for a little bit, let him recharge whatever he charges, and then you come back. And that's what's kind of fun is, if you have a set idea in your mind, spirits cannot deviate you from that path. Only you can deviate you from your own path. And that's extremely important because if you go into a location that has a lot of dark energy, a lot of, potentially dangerous investigation, if you can ground yourself, keep yourself on a straight, level plane. The way I always thought about it was, you're kind of like this, things can go south really quickly, or things can get even better. So if you have something that's attacking your group, either physically, mentally, or just environmentally, keep yourself on that level plane. Don't give into it. Don't say, hey, I saw a red-eyed thing over there. Let's go chase it. Don't. I do not recommend. I've done it before. It doesn't end well. It's never ended well for me. The 5 times I've been a part of that. But as long as you keep yourself level, then you can assure yourself that you'll be safe, your team will be safe, and on a level, good, positive surface to base your investigation off of, and you'll keep the location safe. You don't want to be in, an old museum like this. They've got old stuff on the wall, and you just start destroying a bunch of stuff because you're scared of, a shadow.
Right.
Just a few more minutes. Once you've done your investigation, you've got 30 minutes left till they open the doors. What I like to do, we'll do our circle again, same pattern. We won't reverse it. We'll keep it in the same. Because, I like to keep things in routine. That's just my personal take. But, no equipment. Just walk in. I'll take my pictures. I'll get, nighttime B-roll with my 10,000 LED lights. And we'll say, thank you, spirits, for letting us be in here. We really appreciate, any and all contact between us and positive spirits. We don't give any recognition to negativity. Even if that was all we experienced, we still don't. Because, spirits, good and bad, can attach themselves to, or they can actually imprint energy. And that's something that my dad taught me early on. You hear spiritual attachment. There is a spiritual attachment that can happen without them following you home. Because if negativity has attached even the smallest little bit of energy onto you, it can still grow. And if you live in a haunted house, it can actually make those spirits supercharged. So we like to do that. My dad and I, we always do also like a second run through because I'm really forgetful. And we'll thank the people, they'll let us out, ideally. And we'll walk out. What we'll do actually before we get in the car is we'll look back at the place, say, thanks building, we appreciate it, have a good one. Just ending it on a very positive and very respectful note. Respect the spirits is extremely important. That's one of those non-negotiable things. And what we'll do, even if it's late at night, my dad taught me this is extremely important and it saved my bacon so many times. When you're going home from an investigation, don't go straight home. And what you do, and why this is important, all throughout the day you have your baseline energy. When you're doing your walkthrough of the location, you have the baseline energy. Of course, the investigation, it's going to change. It's going to go like this. But it's important when you do that last walkthrough that you have somewhat of that baseline energy. And when you leave the building, as you're saying goodbye to the inanimate bricks and wood or whatever it is, make sure that energy is the same. When you get in the car and you're driving, merging onto the interstate, make sure that energy is the same. Because if something is off, then that means something's either attached, energy to you, or something is following you home. And you need to nip that in the bud as soon as humanly possible, or else it can go horribly wrong. A lot of these possession stories, poltergeist stories, negative stuff you hear about, that's typically how it starts, even if the people don't realize it. They've probably been somewhere where there's negative energy, negative hauntings, and it's imprinted onto them. So we'll usually stop at, like a gas station, or we'll stop at a Walmart, walk around just a little bit. If something does follow us home, what we'll do is we'll actually sit in the car because it's invaded our personal space. And, we'll do our grounding exercises. I say a bit more prayers. He really doesn't, but that's perfectly fine. And then we'll say, whatever entity is here, good or bad, you cannot be here. Go back, whence you came. and then we wait just a little bit. Breathe in, breathe out a few times. We'll actually step out of the car, go into whatever we're doing, come back in. Is the energy the same as it was when we first got in the car in our house that morning? If it is, then you're supposed to go back home. If not, then you basically have a little bit more work to do. But once you get home, do your evidence review. I actually like to do mine almost as soon as possible, simply because the investigation is fresh. Some people, they like to wait a few days simply because you have your energy cleared from it. You're not, I guess, being affected by the energy of that investigation, the memories of it. And because if you had something happen, you want it to be recorded, I think you can imprint that onto the recording. You can also disappoint yourself. It's like, oh, I didn't get that. Man, that investigation sucked. You might have like 150 Class A EVPs, but because you didn't get that one you were focused on, you'll be upset, which is never good. So I like to do mine instantly, because if something happens and we don't react to it, I have my notes. I'm like, where were we? Environmental factors, could have been us, That's just how I do it. It usually takes me 3 or 4 days, so it kind of wears that off. But after I get all my evidence compiled, I actually break it down room to room. And what I'll do is I'll take my historical notes. Hey, we had a voice of a girl named Sally. Why Sally here? What's her story? If it corroborates, with historical facts, oh, this is who Sally was. Man, I wish I had done more research into her. If, there isn't a Sally there, it's like, okay, we either have someone pretending to be a little girl, or we have the historical mystery. Why is there a little girl named Sally in this old Civil War museum? Presumably she didn't die here, so, what's she doing here? So then you plan the follow-up investigation. And I still like to write my reports. It's going to sound funny. You can almost do it in like a captain's log format. I know a lot of people do that. And it's perfectly fine. That way you can digitize it in the moment. You can also hear, how it affected you. If something really scared the crap out of you, your voice is going to tremble. You're going to be shaky when you think about it, when you talk about it. And going back months and months later, you can pick up on that. So if you ever plan a future investigation, said location, you can have that to look out for. Or if there's a good investigation, you say, hey, I really love this. This was a lot of fun. You can see, you can kind of tell, hey, Jake really enjoyed that 3 months ago. We should plan another trip. Sounded like a lot of fun. But it's always very important, once you're done with evidence review, you test the baseline energy again. Because you have your voice recorders, they can imprint the energy onto, sound waves, however that works. I'm not a scientist. Or they can imprint on your equipment. So, at the beginning of the investigation, middle of the investigation, doing the investigation, the end of it, come up with a list of like, did I change it all? Did, my idea, of this place, my investigation style, my thought pattern, did anything change at all? And if it did, you need to look at what you need to do different. You also need to look at what changes. Was it something that happened spiritually? Was it a change in my life that happened during the course of this? And then you can proceed after that. And then once you're done, kind of self-explanatory, you're done. You can move on to the next one. I like to keep mine, kind of organized, because I'll run into a moment, like dealing with elemental entities, demonic, where it's like, hey, this sounds familiar. I'll go back through my notes. Hey, I experienced this, 5 years ago at such and such location. So what did I do to combat that? Now I'm pulling up, it's like, oh, that's exactly what I did. That's just, having a good idea, a good formula for an investigation. I think that is the best way to do that. But I believe, Damien, is that time?
Yeah, that's time.
Yep, 12:31. Thank you all for listening to the lecture. Does anyone have any questions?
Oh, you have a nice hotel.
Nice.
How many times were you followed home by a negative entity, would you say?
It's only happened maybe 2 or 3 times that I can remember. Once when I was younger, we had something follow us home, and it actually supercharged the spirits in our house. And, it took a little while, but we eventually got over it. I did have something, my very first time at St. Albans, I had something follow me home. But it was weird because I didn't experience anything, like seeing shadow figures in my room, hearing voices, seeing things. The way it worked was mental. I was in military school at this time. And, I'd be doing my studies, we'd be training with rifles, and I would hear voices in my head, like, male, female, older, younger. Hey, Jake, you need to go to St. Albans. And I'd be looking around, like, what in the world? And I'd be doing something else, in class saying this. Hey, Jake, you need to go to St. Albans. Oh, it's not me. But it was something, had imprinted energy, and it wanted me to come back. And I did. I actually ended up becoming obsessed with the location. And when I went back May 13th, I ended up seeing this weird it was a demonic like blob figure, and I was probably, I don't know, from me to the front row from as close as I've ever been to anything like that. And it's still in the top 3 scariest moments of my life, but that was probably the only 2 times I can think something negative followed me home.
So does time affect negative or positive entities?
You said timing?
Like time, yeah.
Yeah, I think time can. You know, some people believe that 12 a.m. is the witching hour, 3 a.m. the devil's hour. I think there is an energy shift that could be happening that would give them a bit more energy to do stuff. I also think if you go in and, you know, you're investigating, you look like, oh, it's 12 o'clock, the witching hour, ooh, you know, you're telling yourself subconsciously in your group, hey, more stuff's gonna happen. Or, you know, 3 a.m., the devil's hour, ooh, hope scary stuff does happen. You're telling yourself, demon hour, you know, watch for scary stuff, and you could be affecting the energy of that location. And I think, you know, I think that could be important. Also, historical events, if, you know, like a battle happened at 12 o'clock, you're on a battlefield, I think that could help. But I think time is very important on investigation. Alright. So anyone else have any more questions? Alright, cool. Well, I appreciate you all listening to me ramble for a little bit.
Thank you. It was awesome.
Thank you. I appreciate it.